Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a big old 12-game Major League Baseball slate. This slate features a lot of games. There's going to be some weather issues. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also, shout out to Brian B. and Glenn Allen H. for joining the membership. So let's get into the slate, though. We have a pretty interesting slate. The weather concerns are the Milwaukee-Cincinnati game, San Francisco-Pittsburgh game, and the Dodgers-Mets game. Now, I do think all the games will play today, but there's still some risks there. We also have two games that are parts of double headers, the San Diego-Philadelphia game and Tampa Bay-Kansas City game. So do keep that in mind, as it does give us some pause when it comes to pitching and also which batters are going to be playing, especially the cheaper options. With that said, let's get into the slate. We'll start with our pitchers here. Spencer Strider for Atlanta is the top tier overall guy. He's had 4 straight games over 28 fantasy points, and he's had at least 9 strikeouts in those games and no more than 2 earned runs in any of them. He's been really solid lately, and so I do like his upside, though he is very expensive and hard to roster as a result. Pablo Lopez is a good option off of him. In his last start versus Kansas City, that was his best game of the year with 12 strikeouts, and he had just 4 hits, gave up just 4 hits, and no earned runs. He's been limiting the hits well lately as well. He's a great upside matchup here against Oakland. I really like him in this one. And then Framer Valdez for Houston. He does face the Angels, and in 2 games versus the Angels this year, he was over 29 fantasy points in both games. He draws a lot of upside here with the injuries to the Angels, though Ohtani does line up here probably, but he does draw good upside regardless and has a good K rate, so he's a great option on the slate. Then we'll look at Kirby for Seattle. He's got a great matchup for a guy who's been solid all year. He draws good metrics here and only has a few bad games on the season, and he's got a good potential matchup here against Detroit, though his ceiling is not nearly as high as the top 3 guys. I'm also going to look at Cobb for San Francisco against Pittsburgh. He's a good, cheaper play. He's kind of boom or bust here, though, but he's pitched decently lately. He has a lot of floor games as well, but I do like his upside, and he has averaged 16 fantasy points over the last 10. He's definitely got a 20 fantasy point game available here. And then we'll also look at Lorenzen for Detroit. He's a good value play, or kind of risky, but has a pretty decent ceiling for this game, though he doesn't have a great floor. His K rate has been up and down, but he does draw some potential here, as he is averaging around 15 fantasy points a game over the last 10, and he's had several 20 fantasy point games. He's just had a couple of floor games as well, so he's the riskiest option available. Like I said, we do have some rain issues with Milwaukee, Cincinnati, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and the Dodgers and Mets. I do expect all the games to play, but make sure to check out Kevin Roth on Twitter to make sure you can get the up-to-date information on what games are going to play today. So let's get into our catchers here. We'll start with William Contreras, who is a core play for me from Milwaukee. He draws great metrics here. He's hitting the ball pretty decently, and he's averaging over 10 fantasy points over the last 10. He's got top-tier metrics here, and he has home run potential. I like his upside. We'll also look at Sable, Blake Sable for San Francisco. He can play in the outfield as well at $3,800. He's had a few solid games before the break. He also has home run potential, and he's averaging 7.5 fantasy points a game over the last 10 with 3 home runs. I do like his upside here. You can also consider Salvador Perez, Will Smith, Sean Murphy, and Adley Rutschman at this position. Maybe in the first base, we're going to start with Matt Olson. I almost made him a core play today because of how good he's hitting. He's just so expensive. He is somewhat hard to roster on the slate with there's not a great amount of pitchers that are cheaper today, so it does make it hard to roster expensive bats. But he hit his 30th home run yesterday, which was a grand slam, and he's got all sorts of good metrics again today, so I do like his upside. I do want to mention that Ohtani is a day-to-day possibility game today. He may not play today, but he did have a blister on his finger yesterday, so that's why he came out. Wade Jr. is in play for San Francisco. Now, he's been somewhat inconsistent lately as he's been in a bit of a slump. He's still getting hits though, and that does give him some upside. His price is nice and cheap, and he definitely draws good potential. He's also better on the road than he is at home, so that gives him some upside as well. And he's been solid against Pittsburgh this year. Jose Abreu is a very good cheap play at $3,100 for Houston. Now he does face Detmers, who's had some good games recently, but his floor is low and his ceiling is really good as he has home run upside. He has averaged 7 fantasy points a game, and his batting average is improving as of late. And in his last game, he had a really solid game yesterday. Then we'll also consider Anthony Rizzo, Otani, Ryan Mountcastle, Freddie Freeman, Pete Alonso, and CJ Cron at this position. Maybe in the second base, we'll look at Torres for the Yankees. He draws good metrics for this game, and this game is in Colorado, which gives him even more upside. He's had 3 straight games over 10 fantasy points, and he's had all of those have been multi-hit games as well. He has nice potential here, and the Yankees in general have a lot of upside, though they are somewhat expensive. Mookie Betts is also in play here. He draws good metrics, and he's hit the ball about as good as anybody this season. Recently, he's had some really massive games, especially if he can hit some home runs. But he's averaging almost 17 fantasy points a game over the last 10. He draws good metrics, but he's very hard to roster as a result of his price. Then we'll look at Dubon for Houston. Now, I really do like his upside here. I think Houston's a kind of a good sneaky value play team today, as they have a lot of good value options. He's not a big home run threat, but he is capable of a good game, and he has several good hitting days over the last 10. He has some good metrics here for this one. Brandon Lowe is also in play here for Tampa Bay. Now, he hasn't hit the ball well this season, but he draws fantastic metrics here, and he's a good, cheap option if you want to go with a guy from Tampa Bay. He's definitely a way to do it, though I don't think he's the safest play on the slate by any stretch of imagination. Then we'll look at also considering Luis Arias, Matt McLain, Ozzie Albies, and Kyle Farmer. Kyle Farmer is also super cheap, which definitely gives him some upside. Maybe in the third base, we're going to look at Ryan McMahon. Now, this position is kind of rough as everybody feels a little bit slumpy, but he's got the best metrics of the position, and he is at home, which gives him some upside. His batting average is significantly better at home. He also has good home run potential here, so I think he's got great upside on this one. Then we're going to look at Josh Donaldson for the Yankees, as he draws some good metrics for this game. This game being in Colorado gives him some really good upside. He does feel very boom or bust, as he managed to score a lot of 0 fantasy point games due to his batting average being absolutely awful. But he does draw good metrics in a game in Colorado here. Then we'll look at Alex Bregman, who has hit the ball better than most of the other guys at this position, but he's still hitting the ball pretty subpar lately. Though he is getting hits in most games, he still feels risky because he hasn't had a 10-plus fantasy point game since the end of last month. However, he does score fantasy points in most games as he's getting lots of hits. Just not stringing together a lot in a single game. Isaac Paredes is a good value play on the slate as well, as he's got better recent play, as he's averaging almost 9 fantasy points a game. He's also fairly priced, and he's on a really good team that has a lot of good potential today. You can also consider Austin Riley, Donovan Solano, and Manny Machado at this position. Maybe in the shortstop, Wander Franco is in play for Tampa Bay. He does have home run upside in this matchup, though he hasn't hit a ton this season. He's averaging over 10 fantasy points a game over the last 10, and he has had a lot of solid games in that stretch. Then we'll look at Volpe for the Yankees. Now, he hasn't been as good the last few games as he had been, but he's still hitting the ball well recently. He's averaging 7.5 fantasy points a game, though the batting average has really taken a drop. But he does draw home run potential in this one, so he's definitely in play as an option today. Dubon can also play at shortstop today if you want. And then Willie Adames for Milwaukee. While he does face a tougher matchup, he's hitting the ball a lot better recently. His batting average is rising as he's hit 302 the last 10 games, averaging over 11 fantasy points a game. He's had no zeros in a while. He's hitting the ball extremely well. I like his upside and potential here in Cincinnati. Also consider Ella De La Cruz and Carlos Correa at this position. Maybe in the outfielders, we have 5 top-tier plays. Giancarlo Stanton, Ronald Acuna, Kyle Tucker, Randy Arozarena, and then Fernando Tatis Jr. They all are very expensive, but they have all sorts of good metrics for these matchups, and I do think all of them have really good home run potential, though they are going to be hard to roster on the slate. I do think they all have potential. Harrison Bader for the Yankees is in play as a value play. He's had some good games lately, though he is drawing good upside in a plus matchup. He still has some inconsistencies, and he is kind of been robust throughout but he does have home run potential. Then we'll look at Christian Yelich, who barely makes it in as a value play, sort of. He's averaging almost 14 fantasy points a game, though, hitting the ball extremely well in the last 10, and he draws really good home run upside in this matchup. Then we'll look at Nolan Jones, who is in a risky position as he has not hit the ball all that well lately, but he finally had a good game yesterday with a home run, and he has some good metrics for this one. If he draws a start, he's somebody I would definitely consider as a home run potential guy. Anthony Santander for Baltimore, does feel like he's in a tough matchup, but he does hit the ball really well recently, averaging almost 270, and he's averaging nearly 9 fantasy points a game. He has some really good games lately as well. I just wish he was a little bit cheaper, but the home run upside is here, and he does draw good potential. Austin Hayes does not look as safe as Santander, but he's also a lot cheaper. He's hitting the ball better, but he definitely has more zeros, though he has a good batting average on the season, and he's hitting the ball really well lately, so I like his potential here. And if you want to go with the Baltimore stack, using Santander and Hayes both is definitely something you could do. Michael Harris for Atlanta is also in play, as he's really turned his season around after starting the season really rough. He's hitting the ball really well lately, and he does draw home run metrics on this game, as well as stolen base potential. You could also consider Mike Yastrzemski, Billy McKinney, Chase McCormick, and Juan Soto at this position. Overall, this slate is pretty rough, and it does give me a lot of concern because of how there's not a ton of value, and the pitching is pretty expensive. So I do think it's a good slate, though. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.